Testing, 1, 2, test, test, test. Hello. Let's see if I can hear myself. Nice. Check, check, check. Nice. Check, check, check. All right. Test 1, 2, test 1, 2. Test 1, 2, test 1, 2. Cool. So I have never live streamed before, so we'll see how this goes. I need to get a link to this to post. There's the media. All right. Cool. Hello, Kishore Raja. How are you? Sorry, I'm still just getting set up here. Great. How did you find my stream? Are you a subscriber? Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. Yeah, so I have a video that is getting posted to the Traversy Media channel today. It's supposed to go live in 5 minutes. And so for that video, I actually put together I took an application that he created and I sort of added a bunch of DevOps principles to it, including Dockerizing it, using Terraform to deploy the infrastructure, and then using GitHub Actions to actually set up CI/CD. And so this is the application. You can go to it at storybooks.devopsdirective.com and create an account and post stories, etc. And so the plan for this live stream is to monitor the resource usage for the virtual machine that this is running on and the cluster that the database is running in, and see if the onslaught of traffic from Brad's channel when that video goes live is too much, or it can handle it. And so I think it'll either be sort of a casual hangout or it will be stressful if the site goes down, and we'll sort of have to see what happens. But definitely go over to storybooks.devopsdirective.com, check it out, create some stories, add some load. Awesome. But I need to have a comment ready so that I can link people to this live stream from Brad's channel. So my plan is to just set up a redirect on Cloudflare to take live.storybook or like storybookslive.devopsdirective.com and redirect it to my YouTube live stream link. So let's see. Oh, good idea. I will post that here. I'll post in the chat now, and then I'll add it to the description in in a minute. Not into DevOps. With my interest to learn more on DevOps. Do you work as a software engineer now, like more full stack, or what do you do? Nice. So my plan here is to, let's see. So I think in order for a redirect to work on Cloudflare, I need to have at least a valid A record. So I'm going to do something like storybooks live, put that there, save. And now I can go into page rules and I'm going to change this one because I think I only get 3 rules on the free plan. I'm going to do storybooks live, double objective, and that is going to go to this live stream. Let's see. Down to the wire here. We got 2 minutes. This videos. Because I want this link to stay live after. Get shareable link here. Wording rare, permanent. So now I think if I go to storybooks live.devopsdirective.com, it should take me to this live stream. Sweet. Cool. So that's set up, and now let's see, refresh the page here. Nowadays, everyone is involving DevOps as part of the testing activities. Yeah, I think more and more as everyone moves to cloud-based infrastructure and we can provision it via software APIs, like the gap between development and operations continues to close and close. And so everyone is starting to incorporate a lot of these practices just because it empowers the developers to move so much faster, for sure. And then I also want to pull up my GCP page. GCP, see. All right, so here's the console for the project. Go there. I'll also pull up the Atlas cluster. Hey, we've got another story here. Awesome. So here is the MongoDB Atlas interface. So basically what I'll be monitoring is the usage of these resources within Atlas, as well as within this compute engine VM, and hopefully they can withstand however many people go use it. So when no one is using it, we can see it's using less than 1% of a CPU. Okay. So we'll see if it can hold up to the task. Oh, nice. That was your story. Got it. Yeah, so I limited it. So it should only show like the latest 15 stories, I think. So if there are a bunch, then uh, it shouldn't like fill up the page too much. I was going to try to make it random, but then just didn't get around to doing it. But yeah, the application itself was pretty neat. I basically took it from Brad's channel. He had gotten it all the way to a development sort of setup, running. And the only thing I did, the only content that I added was this little blurb at the bottom, and then also that limit on how many stories it can use. And I also flipped the order in which they load. I think by default they were loading in ascending order, so it would always start with the oldest and go to the newest. And then I switched it so it would show the latest stories only. But let's see. Hey, looks like we're live. Nice. I'm gonna open that and then pause it so I can see the comments section. And then I want to add Storybooks Live. DevOps. So I'm going to add a comment pointing people to this live stream. Hello, Waleed. How are you? I'm doing well. I'm super excited for this video to go live on Brad's channel. Nice. Have any of the people on the stream worked with these tools before, either Docker or Terraform or GitHub Actions? Just leave a comment on the stream if you've used them, or if you're excited to learn about them, or if you plan to use them in the near future. All right. We've only got 3 stories so far. People, you gotta add some load. It's not even struggling. We're sitting at a very low CPU usage. Ashe. Oh, awesome. Thanks for coming to join the community. I produce lots of videos around DevOps and cloud infrastructure content. Some of them long form tutorials like this one on Brad's channel, some much shorter, kind of 5-minute summaries where I try to condense industry best practices into a digestible format that you can come and sort of learn something new and apply it immediately to your work as a software engineer. So awesome. Clashing with Sahil Khanna. Welcome. Thanks for joining. All right. Cool. Well, I'm just going to create some stories just for fun to see if we can add a little extra load. Studying, want to learn more about DevOps. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, DevOps is a really interesting topic. I studied mechanical engineering for both my undergrad and graduate degrees, and then moved into software. And then I just found that the sort of full stack and infrastructure pieces were the most interesting to me. And so I learned a bunch of DevOps topics and started to produce content around them, because I really enjoy sort of building things and then explaining to other people how to build them as well. So glad to be here. Always love DevOps and DevOps technologies. Me too, for sure. Whenever I can automate something that used to be a painfully manual, that is always a good day. Let's do this and this. All right, actually, I'm going to flip those. Okay. Got a new story from Brainwave Mauju. I pronounced that right, hopefully. But yeah, in terms of application architecture, basically, I have the app running. It's a Node.js based app with an Express API. It's not using React or anything like that. It's using a library to template the views on the back end. And then I have the database running separately within MongoDB Atlas. And then I have Cloudflare as the DNS provider, as well as a caching solution, so that all the traffic comes in, gets routed by Cloudflare, serves it from a cache if possible, like the login page. Then when we actually need to go load from the database, it hits the node server, queries the Mongo database, pulls those stories back, and then displays them to the end user. So those are the three pieces that I set up. I used Docker to sort of take it from a development environment to a system that I knew that I had high confidence it would deploy appropriately onto this virtual machine in the same way that it was running locally. And then I used Terraform to create all of the resources in GCP and create the DNS record in Cloudflare and create the MongoDB database in Atlas. And then I set up a GitHub action to actually do the deployment. And so I'll actually just pull up the code here and maybe we'll just walk through some of this. If the app seems to be doing fine, so there's no need to stress there. GitHub, storybooks. Cool. So the initial repo can be found on Brad's channel or GitHub, Brad's GitHub here. I forked it onto my GitHub and then made all these modifications. Herba Musangwa, I love your approach. Let's make sure the community grows. Thank you for joining. Thanks for commenting. I'm super excited to have you all here. It's interesting. Oh, hey, Absalon Eldemir. Thanks for the great tutorial. You are welcome. It's cool here to see the subscriber count grow as well. I started my channel back in March and sort of grew very slowly for the first little bit. Actually, I can just pull up very slowly for the first little bit. and then have started to pick up some steam. So yeah, so release some videos, would get just a few views a day, and now we're up to a couple hundred views a day, a few handful of subscribers every day, but that continues to grow as well. So super awesome. Activated. Hello, George. Activated the notification bell. Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, the tutorial walks through all of it in great detail, but I can just kind of jump through a few of the key elements here. The first thing I did when I created when I forked the application was to Dockerize it. And so here's the Docker file. Pretty simple. Just starts from a Node version 14 base image. This just establishes the working directory. We copy in our package.json and package lock.json in order to install all our dependencies. And the reason that we only copy in those files and not all of the source code is that with each step, Docker actually caches it. And so if we'd copied in all the source code, then any change to the source would cause us to have to reinstall all the dependencies. So instead, hey, we got a couple more stories here. Uh-oh, why is the styling weird? I'm blaming that on Brad though. I didn't touch the CSS, so we're gonna blame that one on Brad. Cool. But yeah, so we install the packages then with npm, then we copy in the rest of our source code. This user node one is an interesting one. So by default, a lot of, hey, I'm back end DevOps. I don't deal with the front end, you know? I can't make stuff look nice. Yeah. This by default would be using a root user. And so by switching it to a non-root user, and this node user is actually set up in the base image. So if I go to Docker Hub Node.js, we can look at the source code for these base images. Let's just pick, what did we say, 14 Slim. Is this one? And so they create this user. They add this user with ID 1000 and name it node, and it is non-root. So it's good practice that once you've installed all your stuff and you no longer need root privileges to switch to a different user. Port 3000 is where the app is listening on, and then this npm start is just the command that we have set up here in our package.json to run the app. Yeah, so it runs this guy with environment set to production, and that is about it on the Docker file. Just to make things easier to run locally, I set up this Docker Compose, and so that way, rather than having to run the app and then also run the database separately, I can go ahead and just run Docker Compose up, and it will build my application container, run this public Mongo container, and then connect them together over this bridge network. Yeah, so that's about it on the Docker front. I'm just gonna reload the page over here. Nice. 18 comments. Oh, it's just reading through these. Great content. Awesome. Looking for a C#. I am not a C# developer. Sorry, K Rico. Looking for that. Good stuff. Dementor Live. Cool. Yeah. I'll just go back to the code and kind of keep walking through the different pieces, similar to what I did in the video, but here I can dive in and answer questions if people have any, or feel free to ask questions in the chat if you have them about the setup. Oh man, already over 907. So I have a running joke with my wife that I wasn't going to shave my beard until I got to 1,000 subscribers, uh, and I've done that since I got to 100, and that was back in July. So it's getting a little bit out of control. But I think Brad's gonna give me the boost that I need to get over the hump on that one. So super excited to accelerate the pace towards 1,000 subscribers. So thank you all for being here and joining. How did I deploy it to GCP? Yeah, I certainly hope so. Okay, cool. So to deploy to GCP, I did a few different things. To spawn to spawn the virtual machine, you could just do it from within the GUI. You could go here and you could click you could go here and you could click create instance and do that sort of thing, but that would be sort of the antithesis of DevOps practices. Instead, what we do is I used a tool called Terraform, and Terraform is a tool from HashiCorp. And so if we go here to the Terraform directory, you can see I have one file for each of my cloud providers. So gcp.tf here, you start by defining the provider itself. And so this is basically the interface between Terraform and the API of GCP. And so you specify a few variables, you give it the credentials that it needs to access and provision these resources on your behalf. So I created a service account with the appropriate permissions. And then I created 5 different things here. So the first one, and let me know, should I zoom in? Can you see it good enough? I created a static IP address. This I didn't create, this I'm just referencing. It's just the default network that Google sets up. The firewall rule, this is what allows HTTP traffic to arrive from the external internet and make it to the virtual machine. The operating system image, so this is just a reference to the container optimized OS that I end up using. And then this defines the instance itself. So I say like what size machine. So in this case, I'm using a 1 virtual CPU, 3 gig of RAM or 3.75 gigs of memory. It's in US Central 1. And so you set all this up and then you run the Terraform apply command. And it actually goes and provisions that for you. And then after you have that provisioned, to actually deploy to Terraform, to GCP, I'm just using these Docker commands executed over SSH. So I use this makefile to store a bunch of sort of small helper functions that I need, or scripts that I run to do various things. And so the deployment stuff is down here, where basically I just run a bunch of these commands. This make SSH command just executes a single SSH command in the compute engine instance that I just set up. So I first say Docker credential GCR. So that enables the virtual machine to access the container registry where the container is stored, since it's a private registry. This one just pulls that image. So before I stop the running container, I want to have pre-pulled the first one so that I don't wait too long. If I stop it and then have to pull it, there'd be more downtime. And since I'm only running a single instance, there's inevitably going to be some downtime, but the faster I can switch over from one version to the next, the better. Docker container stop, this just stops the previous running container. This cleans up the resources associated with that. And then this is the one that actually deploys and starts the new container. So it's kind of complicated, but basically this command says run this container in the background with this daemon flag, the name, restart unless stopped. So if something did go wrong, it would actually try to restart it. I port forward from port 80 on the outside, so that's where the HTTP traffic is coming in, to port 3000 inside the container where the app is listening. This tells the app to listen there. This is the connection string so that MongoDB can connect. And then this provides the necessary info to have the OAuth client work correctly. And then this remote tag is actually the tag where it's stored within that container registry. So that's how I deploy. I run this command from within a GitHub action, so it all happens sort of automatically. But that's the gist. By the way, on Brad's channel, Why did you start with local Mongo, yet Mongo Atlas can be easily configured? So when I'm doing local development, I want to try to avoid having any external dependencies. It it just helps to make the iteration pace faster. I would prefer to not have to have let's say I'm doing development, I don't have a live internet connection, or I'm on a plane, or whatever. It's just better practice, in my opinion, to avoid having external dependencies when doing local development. So it'll just make things a lot faster, and not have to deal with credentials and that sort of thing. So by doing it this way, and having this Docker Compose set up, let's say I was working on this with another person. Now we can each have our own local database and not have to go through the process of sort of provisioning and setting up Atlas. Does that make sense? Abhishek Rawat, hey, how's it going? Still loading okay, although it does look like, oh, there we go. Just takes a little while for the widget to load at the bottom there. Let's check on how our resources are doing. Cool. I'm glad that makes sense. Yeah, basically similar to that explanation I just gave for development environment. Like if you're running tests, whenever possible, you want to try to isolate your tests from requiring external APIs or external services, because inevitably that service is going to go down at some point, and then your test's going to fail, and then you're like, it's just sort of a cascading effect, right? So like if you can mock an external API for a test, or run a local database for your development environment, it just is much easier to work with. I was going to check here. We're going to check this environment. Hello, Yassine. Welcome. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining. Let me just see what kind of comments we got going on here. Definitely going. Awesome. Yeah. So there's a number of sort of setup things around. I think the hardest part in this project is sort of getting all the permissions set up properly. But feel free to ping me either on YouTube or Twitter. My handle is @SidPalace. If you run into issues, Abhishek, and we can try to, about to hit 1K. Uh-oh, where are we at? Where are we at? Let me refresh. Live, we're live. 9:51. Oh, look at that. There's a spike. 84 viewers. How many people? We got 11 people in the live stream. Cool. Cool. Yeah, as I was saying, I think the hardest part about this project, and a lot of DevOps things in general, is sort of getting all the configuration set up. The actual code itself is relatively simple, but sort of making sure all your permissions are set correctly, and Terraform and all the tools are using those credentials properly, can be a real challenge. And so while in the video it looks super smooth, and I just go through in about an hour and knock all this stuff out, that is a little bit of a facade, because I programmed the project separately, and it took me, hey Capitalist, thanks for subbing, thanks for joining. I built the project, and that took me, I don't know, like a full day to get everything working. And then I sort of planned out my full approach for the video, and I had a whole sequence of things I needed to do. I screen recorded it once all the way through and decided it wasn't smooth enough. And so I actually screen recorded the whole thing again. And so there were many failures along the way. And so I think a little bit of that gets glossed over in an effort to make it as streamlined as possible, so that, hi Raziv, so that the video itself can be entertaining and fast and as streamlined as possible. But there's a lot of work that goes on sort of behind the scenes. So if you're doing these things and your code is not working, definitely don't get too frustrated, because it takes a number of times. Like, for example, in the video, the GitHub action works on the very first time. But if we actually go into the GitHub and look at the actions tab for this repo, I think there's probably a red history. Oh, I think so what happened, the reason they're not here is that I had a separate repo on my other GitHub account where I did the initial development. And so there was a whole, hey, Sunata, welcome. Thanks for subscribing. I had a whole history of like developing the action before it actually worked. And then once I got it working, I took the version from the video and I moved it to this one. So that's a bit false as well. So it probably took me 10 failed tries before I got it to succeed. We should have a social platform for all updates. What do you mean by that? What kind of social platform for updates? Hope your site survives this hug of death. Let's read this story. Check out his site. Hi, Vihan. I did set up a Discord server, but I haven't actually pointed people to it yet. I can link that. Let me see. I don't use Discord a ton, but oh, Discord is updating because I don't use it very much. But yeah, I basically I try to post videos each Monday, and sometimes I get busy with work, but that's my goal, is to always put out a new video every Monday. So yeah, I'm a Discord noob here. Let's see, invite people, copy. Okay, cool. I just posted a link to a Discord that I set up. I think I'm the only member there currently, but if people want to join, and if you have questions about DevOps stuff or whatever, just feel free to ping me there. I can't promise responsive because I don't use Discord that much, but maybe that will change if I can start to grow a community. Cool beard. Thanks, Nicholas. $967, approaching that 1K mark. Approaching that 1K mark. Couple new subscribers. Welcome to the channel. 2,000 views. Holy cow. Man. Make sure to configure. Oh, do I have it? How do I have it set up right now? Are people able to? Server settings, roles. Yeah, I'll have to look into. Okay, cool. I'll have to look into sort of how to best moderate Discord. I know that, yeah, that often happens. Like they just get overrun by spam and bots and stuff as they start to grow, and the opportunity for the scammers starts to grow. Well, it looks like we survived the hug of death just fine. Pretty casual. I didn't know sort of what level of engagement this would get, but yeah, we can see that sort of when the video went live, it's spiked a little bit, but we've got plenty of headroom there at 0.7%. See how we're doing here. Yeah, that was one thing that was a little annoying about Terraform with MongoDB Atlas, is that it only supported their paid tier. So I had to use like the M10 cluster level, which I think costs about $50 a month. So my plan is, after this video, maybe this weekend, to take this and migrate it to one of their free tier clusters. Basically take the data from the MongoDB database, migrate it to one of the free tier clusters. And then I'm actually going to move this virtual machine, which is currently a N1 standard 1, which is one virtual CPU and 3.75 gigs of memory. And I'm going to put it on one of the just like free tier F1 micro instances, which has 0.2 virtual CPU and 600 megabytes of memory. So hello, Alexander Paul Marinas. Thanks for joining. Thanks for coming over. One of my AirPods just gave me the warning about my battery dying. So hopefully I can charge one up while using the other. Can you guys still hear me okay? $986. We're closing in on it, guys and gals. Perfect. So yeah, I'm going to try to charge my left one while while I use the right one, and then swap in a few minutes. Luckily, it charges pretty quick. But yeah, any other questions in the chat? Hitting that 2K. All right, all right. The one interesting thing that I found, hey, garbage day. Uh-oh, you put your trash out? One really interesting thing about using the Makefile in the way that I did. So I created all these make targets. And if you're not familiar with Make, historically it's used to like build and compiled programs, but I use it for lots of things, just sort of as a way to help store off commands that I'm going to need to run later, as sort of a self-documenting approach. Hey, Luca, welcome. And so because I set these up, my GitHub workflow ends up being super duper simple. So for example, the workflow here, I literally just call those commands in sequence. So I have to configure it between staging and prod. So it's set up, if every merge to the master branch will deploy to staging, and every tag that matches the version v.number format here will push to prod. But the actual sequence of commands here is so simple. I just say build the image, push the image, deploy the image. And so these are all just defined within my make target. And that allows me to have a very sort of portable approach where I could set this workflow up in any CI/CD system in like half an hour once I have everything working like this. Because almost all of them are going to be running on some form of Linux. And therefore, I'll be able to use this make command, and as long as it has the underlying tools like Docker and stuff installed, it's just super duper simple. Thoughts on Rancher for Kubernetes management? I haven't used Rancher at all. I've used GKE managed. Oh. I've used GKE, EKS a tiny bit, and I've looked at DigitalOcean's managed offering, but I haven't used Rancher at all. I did write an article about the pricing across the different cloud providers. So this looks at Azure, DigitalOcean, GKE, and EKS. Hey, welcome. Thanks for subscribing. And so this was sort of looking at, depending on how you've architected your clusters and how many you have, and what size they are, how the costs compare. And so it was pretty interesting. Like GKE used to not charge for their control plane, and now they do charge. I think it ends up costing about $70 a month. And so you can see like DigitalOcean and Azure don't charge. So at the low end, they are the cheapest. But then over time, Google, like the compute engine instances themselves are cheaper relative to the other competitors based on how much vCPU and memory you have. And so, yeah, and I put together a little tool here that you can set different cluster sizes and see how the costs would change. We'll see if this even loads. I haven't loaded this page in a while. Ooh, 997. We are close. We are close, guys. Yeah, this day it's going to be funny on my my plot here. It's going to be a few hundred views a day, and then today I'll have hopefully a couple thousand views. 998, 998. Who's going to be number 1,000? Starting. What's nice about Rancher? Completely self-hosted and cloud agnostic. So you host Rancher, and I'm not actually that familiar with it. Is it basically like an abstraction layer on top of Kubernetes? Rancher. The beard game, though. Yeah, I mean, what should my next goal be? 10,000? Can't you? I don't know. I don't think my wife would go for that. 1,004. Woohoo! Thanks, everybody. Thank you. This is awesome. See how much that's charged. Like a cool. Does it allow you to have clusters that have worker nodes across multiple providers? Like, could you have some on-prem and some in one cloud and some in another cloud? I wonder if it's like a competitor to Anthos almost. Google Cloud has their Anthos product where they're trying to abstract across multiple cloud providers. Yeah, no problem on the resource usage. Awesome. Yeah, I was planning to get around to load testing the site to see, sort of push the limits of what it could handle. But I never got around to doing that. So I am very happy that that it did just fine. I think that, I mean, the actual load isn't that much, right? So if this video has gotten a few thousand views, a very small percentage of those views are actually going to come and click the link. And so I wonder if I didn't even, because I didn't add the HTTPS, YouTube didn't make this an actual link. That's kind of annoying, but I wonder if that's prevented people from going there. I'm a noob at DevOps. Any resources you can recommend? Yeah, so depending on the format you're looking for, there's a bunch of good YouTube channels on DevOps. I actually made a video recommending 5 channels. And the interesting thing is that you don't necessarily need to focus on DevOps specifically, right? DevOps is just a combination of a lot of different skills. So going off and learning some Linux fundamentals. So one of the channels that I recommend is called Tutorial Linux. And he does do some more specific DevOps stuff these days, but he also a while back had a ton of really good sort of foundational Linux content. Another one, Network Direction, I think it was called. This channel has some really good networking content. So it is good to sort of learn about network fundamentals and how IP addressing configuration works and DNS and all sorts of networking stuff. And so learning each of these individual fundamental skills is great because then you can sort of bring them all into how you approach DevOps. So I actually recommend that over really trying to dive in on, hey, I'm just going to learn about DevOps all at once. Like try to find each foundational skill and build that, and then incorporate that into how you approach software development and deployment. What else? Oh, I really like Coding Garden with CJ. Let's see if it comes up. So this guy, he does really long like live streams where he'll just build out full stack applications. So I think he streams on Twitch, but also posts them all to YouTube. So I really enjoy his channel. Really good full stack stuff. Then the AWS channel, that's My Architecture. They have a series called My Architecture, where they'll bring on a bunch of people from different companies and they'll walk through sort of on a whiteboard talking about how they solve various problems for their businesses, and talk through the different architecture pieces. So this one, it requires a little bit more foundational knowledge to be able to understand what they're talking about and the implications. But I've found this to be a very educational one. Yeah, Network Chuck is a good one as well. I definitely subscribe to him for all things networking. Yeah, and then if you like sort of long form conference talks, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, they are sort of the steward of a lot of these open source projects, including Kubernetes, that are related to DevOps. Excuse me. And they post a ton of conference talks from KubeCon and other conferences that they host. And so there's a ton of really good ones from like Kelsey Hightower and other engineers who are talking about applying these things in the real world, usually like 30-minute talks, sometimes with some really interesting demos and stuff, but definitely recommend checking them out. And why am I not subscribed to them? I think I was on my personal channel, but then I'm on my DevOps Directive channel right now. Cool. So hopefully that helps, George. Oh wow, quite a story here from Alexander. The full lorem ipsum. I wonder why that came through with all these style tags and stuff. Wonder if he copied it from somewhere that had those tags already in there. It's kind of weird. But yeah, all the code from the tutorial is in this repo. If you wanted to deploy it yourself, the key things that you would want to do, you would need to set up a service account. You would need to create a Google Cloud project and an account on MongoDB Atlas and on Cloudflare. And then you would need to create a service account. So if I go here to IAM, you would need to create a service account to authorize Terraform to take actions. So that is this one. And then you would need a service account for GitHub Actions. You could make these one and the same, but it's a little better practice to separate them so that you can apply the specific permissions that each of them need. So if we go to IAM, hi, I want to use AWS instead of GCP. So that shouldn't be any issue. So Terraform, AWS has tons of different providers. So if we go here to the Terraform registry, and we can use this AWS provider instead of the GCP provider. And so then we would want to find the EC2 instance. So rather than using the G-Cloud resources, we would just need to map it to the sort of corresponding ones in AWS. And so the EC2 would replace the compute engine instance. I don't use AWS all that much, so I would need to do some more research to look at like how to specify the IP address correctly and the networking stuff. But it should be relatively straightforward if you just follow sort of take what I did, but wherever I'm using GCP, plug in this AWS provider and the different resources. And then you would need to modify, let's see. Other than that, though, like you would need to modify how you're sending the SSH commands to the virtual machine because I'm using the G-Cloud utility here. So yeah, you would need to modify the Terraform config to use AWS with that provider. And then you would also need to modify so I'm using this G-Cloud compute SSH command. Presumably there's a similar way to send SSH commands to an EC2 instance. But yeah, you would just need to swap that out with this. And it should work fine on AWS. I don't see any blockers. Does that help? Cool, good luck. Feel free to ping me if you run into issues, but I think it should be straightforward. Yeah, the other thing, if you were not going to, like I could have just run the database on the same virtual machine as the app itself. I wasn't sure how much load it was going to get this morning, and that's why I separated them. Basically, with very little load, you can just run everything on one instance. Then as you start to scale, you're probably going to pull the database out from the application server. And then if you need even more scale, you're probably going to have multiple application servers with a load balancer in front of them. Yeah, so like if we really wanted to scale, like right now, I'm on a single CPU machine. Node.js by default is going to only use one core anyway. So if I put it on a multi-core machine, it wouldn't actually help. But I could have put it on, let's say, a 4-core machine, spun up 4 instances of the application. Each of them would then use their own core, and then put like Nginx in front of it to route traffic between them. Would be one way that I could continue to scale up. Tell us a bit more, Daira Patel. You can just message me on Discord. I put a link to a server up above. It's probably, I guess, the easiest way. Can you see the chat from before you joined? I'll just post it again. Hi, Lavi. Came from Traversy Media. Your video was great. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Feel free to subscribe for future content as well. Yeah, you can just message me there if you run into issues. But you were asking, Hervé was asking more about Docker. Sure. So Docker's a really interesting tool to build containers, to build and run containers. There's other container runtimes as well, but Docker is definitely the most popular. And essentially, it allows us to build it's like a virtual machine, but it's lighter weight because they can all share one kernel, I believe is but it allows you to build a compute environment and all of the dependencies into a single image that then we can run consistently across different platforms. So even though I'm running on a MacBook, I know that when I deploy to this Linux-based virtual machine in Google Cloud, I'm confident that it's going to work properly. And so I have a few videos about Docker actually that are super useful if you're interested in learning more. There's a number of sort of best practices that you can use. Let's see. Oh yeah, we can see the beard progression too. Starts off short, gets a little longer, getting long, super long, boom. Yeah, so I did a series a couple months ago where I talk about how to debug Docker containers, because it's a little tricky when you're first getting started. They're all running, they're running sort of, there's many layers from where your code is running to where your host machine is. And so knowing sort of how to inspect a container and look at the logs and see what's happening is a useful skill. There's also, it's very easy to get very large container sizes if you install all these dependencies. You're not careful about how to do so in an efficient manner. And so there's some tips there around, like, you can do a few things. For example, the Docker file here is just a one single stage Docker file. Where are we? So this is a one stage Docker file. It builds through to the end. I forget the size, but it's probably on the order of a gigabyte, maybe 500 to megabytes to a gigabyte. One thing you can do though is like build your application, and you have all the build dependencies there, and then you can have a multi-stage image. So we could take the built application and copy it into a fresh, like Alpine-based image. So Alpine is a very small version of Linux that is often used in containers. So we could build our application in a normal Debian-based Docker image like this one. So it's Debian Linux. It's much easier to get your dependencies and stuff. And then we could copy it into another slimmer, smaller image based on Alpine, is one sort of trick to making smaller Docker images. There's also a bunch of things to think about from a security perspective. You want to make sure you're not running as root user. You want to run ideally on an operating system or host that is secure in some way. So I'm using this Container Optimized OS from Google, which has a very small footprint. And they have put a lot of work into making sure that it is extra secure for running your containers. You also want to just sort of make sure you're not opening up ports unnecessarily, etc. So yeah, I would definitely recommend watching these 3 videos to learn more about Docker. Hi, what do you recommend to a college student to start learning about DevOps? I think the biggest thing to do is to just start building things. Like, a lot of people want to go off and read a book or watch a video. Whenever possible, you're going to learn a lot more and retain a lot more if you can get your hands dirty and you start to understand the edge cases. So I would just take an application that you've either built or someone else built and you can see a tutorial for, and try to take it from development to production, like I did in this video. Like, take it from your laptop and start to apply these practices and say, okay, I'm going to build a Docker container and run it inside a Docker container. And that's maybe the first step. And once you get that working, then you say, okay, how do I want to deploy this thing? What is the architecture going to look like? Do I need to have a single virtual machine? Do I need to have multiple virtual machines, etc. So yeah, I think just watching video tutorials is good. Reading some books. I think there's a book called The Phoenix Project. I've actually never read it, but a lot of people recommend it. Yeah, The Phoenix Project, people seem to really like. But yeah, I would definitely just say go build stuff. And if you run into issues, ask for help on the internet. There's lots of people that will help you, including myself. But yeah, build stuff, run into issues, try to solve the issue yourself, then go ask for help, and sort of repeat. That's my best advice. Christian Camillo, hi, what are you? Oh, just said that. Hello from Taiwan. Wow, what time is it in Taiwan? Hey, Pei Yao. Same question. Awesome advice about building things. No quick win. Yeah, some people want to jump into DevOps before they have sort of the foundational skills around Linux and networking. You kind of need to bring together ability to build applications, but then also you got to have the foundational skills of, like, where is this thing running? What do I need to know about the system that it's running on? And there are definitely tools that make that easier and abstract some of that away, but without understanding what's going on under the hood, if you ever run into issues, it's going to be very, very hard to debug. And so having some fundamental skills about how operating systems work and how networking works will just go a really long way when you start to run into issues. Hello from Morocco. Awesome. Hi, Amine. 1 a.m. All right. Cool. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I'm also, I haven't done live streams before, but I may try to start doing some live streaming stuff, or like almost like internet office hours, I would call it, where I'm probably just building something, but people could pop on and ask questions, or I could pair program with people. If anyone is interested in that, I may start adding that to my channel. I also want to add some like interviews with some of the companies that I work with, or like CTOs from startups and that sort of thing, where almost podcast style, but sort of talking through how they use DevOps within their companies. Maybe draw out their architecture diagrams and talk through how they use different tools and techniques to achieve scale. And so yeah, I'm thinking about sort of ways to branch out and continue to build on the content that I already do produce. Most of what I do right now is sort of, how do I take a concept and teach it very efficiently? But I think there's could be some really interesting content around interviewing technologists from companies and talking through how they deal with DevOps and scaling their platforms, as well as live streams where I build things and also work with viewers on building things that they're working on. But it is approaching noon, and I think I'll probably head out relatively soon. Thank you all so much for joining. This is super fun to have people in the chat here. Like I said, the Discord is there. Feel free to message me if you have questions, or just feel like chatting. Looks like a few people have already joined it. That's cool. I'll probably start putting it in the description of all my videos so that we can start to grow that community a little bit. And I think that's about it. Any final words from the chat? Super excited to have gotten over 1,010 or something, or maybe 820 at the beginning of the day. So gonna be the biggest day by a landslide. So thank you to Brad for hosting me on his channel. Hopefully people learn some things about DevOps and Docker and Terraform and GitHub Actions. But yeah. Anything else in the chat before I sign off? Looks like we had no issues on the production site at all. Storybooks, DevOpsDirective.com. Hey Philip, thanks for joining. Glad to have you here. Got some really good stories happening here too. That's my favorite story so far, from Bob Gangley. All right. Thanks everybody. I'm gonna sign off. Take care. Smash that like button. Hit the notification bell. What am I supposed to say? All the YouTube things. All right. Have a good one.